Well, hello to my audience. Of course, we want to welcome you joining in this inaugural and introductory episode of the Life, Leadership, and Love podcast. I am your gracious host, Terrence Samuels, and I have the privilege of having two great friends of mine present with us in our inaugural conversation as we think through ways in which faith and spirituality informs and transforms our lives. Let me take a first opportunity to introduce my dear friend Joseph Chin, whom I've had the opportunity to serve with in recent ministry spaces. Very gifted leader and thinker and full of ingenuity. And he's going to introduce himself in 1 second after I introduce my other very dear friend who I've known officially about 20 years, Dr. Winsome Brooks, educator, entrepreneur, businesswoman, woman of virtue. I'm going to ask, of course, Joe, go ahead and introduce yourself, share with our community who you are, what you do. We're in your hands.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me on this inaugural episode, brother. It's an honor to be here. So my name is Joseph Chin, and my mission is to challenge Christian leaders to unpack their identities in Christ so that they'll live the abundant life that they've been designed for. I've had the privilege to um, enter into that conversation and engage my mission in a number of different contexts inside the church walls and outside the church walls. My life is marked by a lot of travel, various experiences inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. I bring I bring all of that to bear on God's creative design for me, and so that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, brother. Dr. Brooks.
Hello, my name is Dr. Winston Brooks. I'm a native from Houston, Texas. I just have a lot of experience working in education, in the government, and also serving in leadership in ministry. And I'm just excited to be here.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for each of you joining in this passion project of mine. So I, of course, brought them on because they're two persons who I highly respect, educated, and they've already shared even in their introduction about their experiences, some of their experiences in life and how they've come to be who they are. So it's interesting because Joseph, of course, led us basically to where we're going to be leaning in some ideas around identity, resilience. Like, what does it take to live a good life or a sustainable life or a healthy life? I was preparing for our inaugural introductory episode and thinking through what are some essential things that the average person may be curious about as it relates to living a good life. And one of the very first things that came up was living authentically, right? Um, I wonder how many people struggle with being true to themselves and their values. I don't know about you, but I found myself in times in life where living and being true to myself, or even discovering who I am, was a significant challenge, or even living into the values when presented with other options could provide some conflict to our lives. Joe, why don't you share with us a little bit about what does it mean to live your authentic self, or even the process of discovering our authentic self?
Yeah, that's one of the, if not the most fundamental question I think as human beings that we have and that we face, because it really confronts us on a daily basis in the storm, if you will, of decisions that we make from sun up to sundown. In conversations with psychology, you'll hear terms like the false self and the degraded self, where many times we're challenged to um, identify or find our identity in either what we do, what we bring to the table, or what others say about us, our reputation. But in many cases, and what I've found is that our identity is really, if I'll say, most secured or discovered. Our identity is discovered in the context of our closest relationships. And so
Mm,
when you really boil it down, identity really is a function of relationships.
wow. Dr. Brooks, with that in mind, how have you found your way through discovering your identity, or what might you add to what Joseph shared about, you know, what are some of those milestones, right? Like, how did you know you found yourself when you found yourself?
I think the key thing is self-awareness. And when it comes down to self-awareness, you have to look at how you're positioned in groups, in the community, how you're positioned amongst others, your friends, your families. And so that has really helped me understand how I should move and live authentically with my life. So, just what are your morals? What are your values, your boundaries? And those are the things that really awaken me. And I have to just go through those experiences.
So,
Um, Sometimes you get them right, you get them wrong, but you just kind of figure it out as you go. So it's kind of a learning thing.
yeah, I mean, with that, I mean, when you share that, it makes me think of oftentimes the need to be kind to ourselves, right? Like, because as we're discovering, as Joe would say it, inevitably that gives language as if it's going to be a journey. We can be oftentimes challenging or hard on ourselves, when we find ourselves realizing that maybe there's something we have done or participated in that doesn't quite match our values, or even if we sometimes we feel bad because we may not have had a certain type of value leading into that. Um, what are some ways in which a person can practice like self-compassion, patience, and this is open to whomever wants to contribute, but what are some ways in which, if we're going to be on this journey of discovery, how how can we manage making sure we're being kind to ourselves along the way?
Yeah, it would seem that if we carry the imagery of the journey, um, I think about the directory kiosk in a mall, where you go in one particular door and you're on one floor on one section of the mall, and you're trying to find a particular shop. Um, I don't think in most cases we go into a mall expecting to be exactly where we're trying to end up.
Hmm.
And so many times it's helpful for me, I found, to go to that kiosk, and then to look for the little red dot. And the little red dot, as has been said, in common expression, just indicates that I am right here. And so I can, if we expand it to this concept of discovery, self-awareness, as you mentioned, Dr. Brooks, um, I know that I'm not where I'm going to end up yet, but um, I do willingly engage with the fact that although I'm not on the third floor yet, I'm on the first floor, and I'm not on the east side, I'm on the north side. I do have some now perspective as to where I am, and I do have an idea as to the direction I need to go. So I don't have to. So I'm trying to say this well. The fact that I'm not where I am as of right now it does not define my capacity or my ability to get there. So I
Mm,
can show myself the grace, the compassion, the patience, the love I need, to carry myself where I'm trying to go. Because I know, because there's a map, then I've got to take care of myself to reach my destination.
yeah. Now, Joe, you're opening up some stuff because on my way, before I got settled today, I was reading this book called The Psychology of Ultimate Concerns by Dr. Robert Emmons. And he suggested that every human being has like this ultimate concern, this ultimate you know, objective in their life. And he basically argued that faith or spirituality, religion, allows there to be some sort of meaning, allows people to discover what that ultimate destination is. And so, thinking with this thought about the journey, and knowing that you're at the red dot, and um, as we walk towards that ultimate concern and discovery, my question, I guess, would be, how important is your faith, Dr. Brooks or Brother Joe? How important is your faith or your belief in God towards your journey to self-discovery or authenticity? How important has it been for you to have some regular rhythms of spirituality, whatever those rhythms may be? Share with me a little bit about that, how your faith has supported this journey towards your true self.
I know for me, it's very important. If I go back to when I mentioned the whole awareness thing and just being aware by myself, one of the things that I teach in my college courses is when you're going through self-awareness, there's 4 types of selves, and one self is called the hidden self. So you have the open self, the blind self, the hidden self, the unknown self. And well, the unknown self is the part that you don't know about yourself and other people don't know about yourself. And so when it comes to things like that, or when it comes to things that people might realize about me that I don't know about myself, which you would call the blind self, I always rely on God. Like that, this spiritual rhythm of just going to worship, having a close circle to have conversations with and talk through these things are very important to me, because me myself, I don't know, but I know as far as like having that spiritual rhythm and believing in God, he knows everything. He's the all being. And so that's why it's so important to me, because I know that I don't know everything and I can't maneuver through everything without relying on God.
Can't do it without God.
Good. That's good.
Did you just reference the Johari window?
I did.
Oh, okay, that makes.
That's it. Okay.
I was like, all right, all right. Joe, did you want to add something to that before?
Yeah, I did. I was following the thread, Doc, with Johari as well. It's it's certainly a beneficial tool. So as you mentioned, Terrence, with I guess earlier I mentioned that identity is a function of relationship, and personally, my relationship with God happens to be the deepest, and I would say longest standing relationship. And I personally believe that each of us has the longest standing relationship with God because He's our creator. But personally, that comes to bear with me because our longest standing, our most stable and secure relationships really form the basis of our identity. And so if we're discussing, if I remember your question correctly, the relationship between my relationship with God and caring for myself, is that where you're right? And so because he is the ground, if I can say that. I know philosophy would say he's the ground of being. He's the basis of my relationship with him forms the basis of who I am. He being a caring God, that's a signal of his character. And so caring has to flow into how I view myself, because it's if identity is a function of relationship, then my view toward myself has to be a function of his view toward me. And so I care for myself because I'm cared for.
Wow.
And so, yeah, with the journey, with the red dot, it's a microcosm of life itself being a process, going back to discovery. And if God, it was told in class in my course of study that transformation when we engage transformation more authentically when we are as patient with ourselves as God is with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's say that again. We engage transformation more authentically when we are as patient with ourselves as
Hmm.
God is. Wow.
Yeah, with us. Yeah.
That's pretty heavy. So let's chase this metaphorical rabbit just a little bit. When did we learn to stop being patient with ourselves? Like, I mean, I'm willing to admit that there were there were times in my life where it's just like I feel like I should have known better or done better or um, expected more out of myself, and I can't be the only person who's ever felt that. Like, where do we learn to be impatient with our flawed selves?
I think it's our environments, what we've been feeding ourselves, what we see on TV, on social media, in the stores, in the communities. And I think that's where we have been trained to not be patient with ourselves because now we're in this microwavable society. And so if we don't get it perfect the first time, then we're upset because now we're like, oh, that's held us back. We can't be where this person is or whatever. So I think is what we're seeing every day that has caused us to not be patient with ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, that's the case. And there have been lots of phrases, lots of words used to describe exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Brooks. I've heard, where love is turned in on itself, and where and then I've heard in other circles, simply what you're describing is a condition called brokenness, where the relationships that we're designed for, as you mentioned, with God, with the world around us, including other people, a relationship with ourselves, gets in essence warped to where a relationship that is intended for interdependence and communion really turns into one of competition. And so a warped relationship like that, just imagine if we have a relationship with God, just imagine a warped relationship now being turned instead of toward God back to me, or back to the individual, or as Dr. Brooks mentioned, a relationship with other people where maybe this is supposed to be a community um, where we engage each other for constructive means and constructive ends, but instead through the warped relationship that we now have with each other, we turn constructive criticism into competition. And then with ourselves, we have the unfortunate, situation where self love turns into selfish ambition, and goal orientation turns into looking out for number one, as opposed to building a community around us. I think there's a lot that that implies, but I think we stop learning to love ourselves when we turn the intention of our relationships inward.
Wow. Yeah, man, that's really good. You know, in the most recent journey, I mean, the reason for which our time exists today, what we're doing right now, um, I propose that when we evaluate like Jesus's life, um, we are left with this self-sacrificing love, right? That causes us to avoid, I think, what James' epistle would say, um, wherever there is selfish ambition and jealousy or envy, there will be strife or contention and all manner of evil. And so, like, let's take this out of, for the sake of conversation, the scripture or out of religion and just evaluate our society, right? where people are selfishly ambitious or envious and jealous, there'll be a lot of contention, strife, just tension, conflict, and all manner of evil. Right? Like that's what that's what the word, this phrase, this verse says in James epistle. And so, for our audience, whether you don't have to be a Christian or follow Jesus to understand that this principle is still alive. It doesn't matter what your background is. When people don't know who they are, they're prone to be competitive, right? Because they'll be hoping to find some sense of significance at the expense of others, right? And then what happens is there's all sort of evil. There's all sort of dehumanization, um, which means that, you know, we'll turn this point into this, like, which means my argument is that we have to have models and examples of harmonizing and humanizing, and self-sacrificing love. And so I'll turn this towards Jesus, right? Like, until if he does not know who he is, he's unable to fulfill his assignment in history, and we don't have models for people who know themselves, love God, and love others. Gives us. I think he's a prime example of the human that God intended for us to be. This is going a good track. I want to keep pressing in a little bit. Um, what do you guys think is the role of, like, the connection between identity and purpose, right? The connection between who I am and what I do. What do you think is the role of identity and purpose? How do they function together? How does one discover either or? Give me some ideas or some thoughts or some of your reflections on the role of identity and purpose.
So this is like, just fair warning, like I geek out on these particular, like these are my two words that have probably been most um, um, impactful in my life. So I'm going to keep my words very few because I could say a lot about how this has been important to me. But you bring up the example of Jesus. If he was disconnected from his identity and his purpose, then, for those who have read the narrative and the historical accounts, there's a moment when he's being threatened with death, and he's being threatened by one of his friends who betrays him. And what he essentially he does is he pauses and says, if I wanted to defend myself against this injustice, I would. And he uses, what some might call hyperbole, but those who believe that he is who he says he is, he says basically, I could call my armies to come defend me. And it's a matter of fact, but imagine if Jesus, who preached and taught the kingdom of God, who came to face a humiliating death on the cross as a substitution for us, decided in that moment that he was fed up with being mistreated. He lost sight of his purpose. He lost sight of the cross, and then therefore the resurrection. And he essentially stood up for himself, which we would say, well, he would be right to do that, being wrongly accused, being wrongly treated. Then he would not have faced the scourging, the whipping, the unjust treatment, the unjust trials, the bruises, the cross carrying. But then his followers would not have ever had a chance of redemption. And so, again, our identity is a function of relationship. He started his public service, his public ministry with a declaration from his dad affirming who he is. And so, again, God being our longest standing relationship determines his thoughts about us, determine who we are. That's identity. And then identity and purpose are connected. Well, I'll just answer the last question, then I'll, move on. I'll be quiet for right now. Purpose can be found in a relationship between, several quadrants. It's your passions, your proficiencies, the pain of people around you, and in the intersection of those, you find your purpose. And that's what I'll say for now. But they're very closely intertwined. We run into trouble when we try to separate the two. We say, well, I'm this person, but I'm essentially, autonomy is our downfall when it comes to separating identity and purpose.
Joe, you dropping some gems. Go ahead, Dr. Brooke.
Well, I guess I can add your identity is who you are, your purpose is why, and when you look at the two, they're interdependent. So they actually strengthen one another. So that's something that, studied and focused when I was getting my degree from the Christian school. Just, your calling, your purpose, all of that is connected. You can't do one without the other. So
wow. So what you are both saying, what you're saying, insinuating, I'm gonna turn the phrase, is that anytime there's what I would call disharmony or dissonance between identity and purpose, that means you're not in alignment. There's something inefficient about your life. There's something about your life or your existence that is not harmonized. Which, if you're not harmonized within, you're gonna have conflict. Things won't be satisfying. Life may not be as fulfilling as was planned for your life. Let's go on the opposite side. What are some of the ways a person can know that there's identity or purpose struggle? What are some of the ways that we can know? I use the word disharmony, but what are some of the real life ways that a person can kind of start coming to the conclusion that they're not who they should be, or they're not operating or living out their calling or their vocation in the way that is destined for them?
I look at motivation. So you have your two types of motivation. You got your intrinsic and extrinsic, and the intrinsic is on the inside. So this is how I know when I'm not aligned. If it's something that I do and I'm expecting something like money or something tangible out of that, then I know I'm not in alignment. But if it's something that I'm willingly and freely giving and I'm not expecting anything in return, then that's how I know I'm operating in my purpose. Because your purpose is going to be connected to how you're motivated as well.
As the kids saying, clock that T.
That's good, Doc.
I mean, what else should be said, Joe? I mean, I'm mad because she referenced one of my favorite books, and that's Drive by Daniel Pink, and he talks about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So that I was like, yeah, are we reading the same books out here in education land? Yeah, that's good. Motivation. What's driving you? Now, we don't have much time left, but I don't want to go too deep. But I was just reading today, like I said, I was on the plane and reading about those two terms in another book. And oftentimes, I'm going a little deep here, oftentimes we perhaps could be motivated by maybe wounds or trauma or brokenness in our story that's underneath. So a person could say, well, I just want to do what God called me to do, which means I need to be in government. And there could be underlying other truths, right? Other narratives operating in our being that may not be completely tied to like the most purest of motivations or purpose. So that person may say, I need to be in government because they may have a father or a parent they respected that was in government, but really that may not be their calling. Like, how could you and I, all of us today, encourage someone who really needs to work through these things to maybe access the narratives that exist within their being? I know we talked about the Johari window. We talked about the relationships around them. How could we give further guidance to people as they're thinking through identity and purpose, to dig into those narratives, to ask the right questions? What are some things that we could offer them?
You know, one of the most powerful tools that I've found personally is a personal mission statement. What it has done for me and for those that I've been able to help craft one is it acts as a filter for decision making. And so I would encourage, what I found helpful is to write down my top 5 passions, what I would stay up for, what I would stay up for, what I would get up for. To write down my top 5 skills, the things that other people tell me I'm good at and that I find easier to do than most people. I would write down um, uh, for those who are in the Christian faith, spiritual gifts. What things have been confirmed by your faith group, your local church, as gifts from the scripture that have been useful to serve the body. Write down and list the people that tug at your heart strings the most, and that could be any group of people from any segment of society, from single moms to doctors to lawyers to nurses to elementary school teachers, any segment of society that you feel particularly attached to. And then finally, the pressing pain point of that group of people, that if as Dr. Brooks alluded to, if money was no issue, if time were no issue, if you had no restrictions, this is the problem you would solve for these people. Because the problem you solve for those people using your skills and your abilities, filtered through your passions, helps you to draw a through line for your life that allows you to see the pains in your past and your present, and that you could expect, are items that inform what you do. They either provide speed bumps or boosts to you accomplishing what you're here for. Um, but if when you have that through line, you can filter out the things that you might need to go to counseling for. You might consider a group of close friends to help you process and think through things. You might consider getting a mentor. You might consider some self-development, reading a certain set of books that target a certain skill. That through line helps you filter out what's the most necessary set of things in my life to focus on, and then what is either helping me or hindering me from accomplishing that. That'll help you accomplish the self-care. I think that's most critical for your life.
That's really good. Dr. Brooks, it's good job.
I would just say, try new things, explore, your gifts, see what your strengths are, what your likes and dislikes, and then that will kind of point you in the right direction of, to get to what, your purpose and your identity and what meshes well with you.
I love it. Well, I'm not going to hold my friends any longer. We just wanted to drop some knowledge for a quick 35 minutes on our first episode of Life, Leadership, and Love. want to just encourage our community to engage, to connect with us. Of course, they say on all social media platforms, like, comment, share, and I want to appreciate those of you who joined us tonight and who will be tuning into this podcast as it's published on all platforms. To my guests, I want to appreciate you guys for sparing your time to help me with this passion project. And I look forward to just chopping it up with you all later. Hey, have an amazing night. I love you.
All right.
Peace.